Mother's Day, Stepmother's Day, whether you celebrate either, neither, or both, this can be a really strange time of year for stepmoms. Now, whether this is your very first season as a stepmother or you are a seasoned pro with decades under your belt in this role, I want you to know that this live is dedicated to you and all the wide array of emotions that might be coming up for you right now. When I talk to stepmoms who reflect back on their experiences navigating Mother's Days over the years, they really do describe it as kind of a montage of different snapshots of human emotions. Like no two Mother's Days are the same for them. And so, first of all, just to normalize that. And also, I want to invite you, as you're comfortable, to share what's on your mind going into this Mother's Day here in the US in the comments. So, whether you're here live or catching the replay after the fact, welcome. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So, as I was thinking about how I could be most supportive to most of us as we go into this holiday, I whoop, I think we lost the stream there for a moment. This is my first time streaming into multiple platforms. So, okay, Facebook is back. Hello. So, as I was thinking about how to make this as helpful as possible for stepmoms, no matter where in your journey you are, I really distilled it down to a handful of recommendations that I can give you. And so as I move through these, I'm going to be pulling in experiences that I've heard from the stepmoms that I know and work with, as well as just my own reflections. I'm also going to direct you to the description box because I have several specific resources that you might find supportive at this particular time of year. So my very first encouragement to you as you're heading into Mother's Day is to self-reflect. So spend some time turning inward where you're uninterrupted and you have the time and space to do that. And just ask yourself, what's on my mind right now? What emotions am I noticing in my body as I think about Mother's Day this year? You might notice any of the following, as well as emotions I'm not even going to have time to name here, but sadness. Sadness comes up for a lot of stepmoms on Mother's Day, and there are many reasons why that might be. But if you're feeling sad, it can feel really at odds with all the joyful, floral bouquet, celebratory vibes that you're noticing this weekend. Just give yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. And my best advice when you're feeling big emotions, like the kind of emotion that stops you in the middle of what you're doing, kind of takes you out for a minute, treat it like the weather, like a storm that's rolling through and will keep on moving, right? You're not going to be under a rain cloud forever. Or picture it as a wave that's reaching a peak and then crashing on the beach and receding. It's just a matter of time. Where we get ourselves into trouble is trying to do battle with whatever we're feeling. If we can just be still, breathe, and let ourselves feel what we're feeling. Sometimes it helps just to put words to it. I feel sad. And we don't jump to try and fix that. We don't make our sadness anyone else's responsibility. We just name it and let it be. Try that out if you haven't before. It can really help. You might be feeling grief. And to be clear, if we kind of, think about the population at large, there are lots of women grieving, lots of people grieving around Mother's Day for all kinds of different reasons. It can bring up reflections, memories, hopes for people regarding their relationships with their own mothers. Or it can make them think about their relationships with their kids. But as a stepmom, of course, there are some unique pieces of grief that you likely are feeling if you're feeling grief this time of year. I have talked about grief at length over on our TikTok account, and so I will be sure to link that below for you. There's a playlist dedicated to stepmom grief because Although it's not talked about as widely as some other stepfamily topics, I believe it's one of the most important topics for us to be talking about, just to normalize how much grief plays a role in the stepmom experience. You might be feeling anger or resentment toward the kids, toward your partner, toward the other household. Who knows who it's toward? You might be feeling a lot of anger and resentment in a lot of different directions. Let yourself feel that too. You might be feeling some joy. Maybe this Mother's Day is a joyful experience for you. And it might feel like that emotion is something that you're free to express to the people around you. It might not. Maybe you've tried to share some of that joy, talked about how excited you are for this Mother's Day, and gotten some mixed response from the people around you. That's normal. A lot of stepmoms experience that. Or maybe you feel guilt because it doesn't feel like a day you're excited about. It might even feel like a day you're dreading. And then that kicks up secondary emotions where you're judging yourself for feeling what you're feeling. You likely are feeling a mix of some of these emotions I just named. And if you are one of the 50% of stepmoms here who are also moms, you're probably feeling a whole mixed bag of emotions toward your kids, your stepkids, and both those pieces of your role. So ask yourself, what am I feeling? What's on my mind? And what do you think you need as you navigate this weekend? What do you think will be helpful to you? If this is not your first Mother's Day, you can reflect back and consider what was helpful to me in the past, what would have been helpful. Or if this is your first, just check in with your intuition. What do I know about myself and what can I reasonably expect this weekend to be like? How can I support myself now, proactively, on purpose, even if that doesn't look the way I thought this holiday would look? Give yourself permission. My second recommendation to you is to loosen your grip on the day itself. We tend, not just as stepmoms, as people, we tend to overemphasize the importance of what happens on big, highly visible public days, like major holidays, including Mother's Day, weddings. We tend to put a lot of emphasis on what everyone says and does, what the environment feels like. All of these like non-specific things we tend to place a ton of emphasis on. And it can carry a whole bunch of meaning for us. And we can also attach a lot of significance in terms of the relationships, like with our stepkids or our partner. But just as we tend to overemphasize the importance of those isolated holidays, we tend to seriously underemphasize the importance of what happens on just every other day of the year, all the regular like Tuesday afternoons in our stepfamily life. But the truth is, stepfamily relationships grow from the seeds that we plant on those regular garden variety days. So remind yourself that whatever happens, even if Mother's Day we have one type of plan and it goes off the rails, or even if it ends up being a failure by however you're measuring that, reassure yourself that actually, while it feels very important now, in the grand scheme of our stepfamily story, it likely is not going to carry that much weight. Now, that kind of leads into this next point, and this is one that when I asked you for your input, like what are you concerned about going into Mother's Day? What are you feeling? What do you need? A lot of you mentioned expectations of the kids. So anticipating how they would or wouldn't honor you on Mother's Day, maybe comments they might make in relation to their mom on Mother's Day. Some of you are in situations where the kids have a mom, but they are full-time under your care. You're functioning as a primary caregiver or full-time stepmom. Some of you have stepkids who have lost their mom, and you're feeling a lot of anticipatory anxiety and even dread about just what the kids will say and feel. You're feeling a lot of responsibility for that on Mother's Day. I want to encourage you to release your expectations of the kids. Maybe you in the past, maybe you reflect back on how they've interacted with you on Mother's Days past, and you recall feeling disappointed, overlooked. I want to share a skill with you. This is a stepmom skill that I talk about often, but I feel like it bears repeating because it can be helpful in so many different situations. It has a really clinical term. You ready? I call it zoom out, zoom in. That's the skill. So when you're dealing with a situation where you're experiencing some friction, some unrest, you're feeling unsettled. So this is a great example. Worry or concern about how your kids are going to respond to you or acknowledge you or not on Mother's Day. If you zoom out, you ask yourself, okay, what piece of this experience might overlap with what a larger group of people are experiencing besides just stepmoms? So if we zoom out from that, feeling kind of disappointed or overlooked on Mother's Day, is it reasonable to assume that mothers in first families feel that way too on Mother's Day? Yes, I think you can safely make that assumption. If you want, you can, poll people in your life, ask mothers that you know, or if you're a mother as well, you can reflect on how you felt about how your kids acknowledge Mother's Day in the past. Yeah, there tends to be a really common theme of womp womp. Like everything I do for you kids all year round, and Mother's Day turns into a day where I have to kind of perform some more, or even worse, I have to like help plan it or clean up after it or whatever. That is a really common experience for mothers on Mother's Day. And so when we zoom out and we recognize, okay, moms feel this way too, not only stepmoms on Mother's Day, what can that do for you? It can provide you a sense of connection to a larger community beyond just yourself. And it can also drain some of the sting out of it. It can depersonalize what you're experiencing. Suddenly, it's not just that you feel disappointed as a stepmom by how your stepkids are approaching you on Mother's Day. You are, in many ways, similar to a mom role. You're feeling like, okay, this is like a mom type experience on Mother's Day, potentially. But that's not the whole story. So that's when we want to zoom back in. When you zoom way back in to the stepmom experience, then you ask yourself, okay, but which pieces of this might be complicated somewhat by the fact that I'm a stepmom? And there we can uncover some helpful insights. You can recognize, well, when a mom feels disappointed by how the kids acknowledge her on Mother's Day, she is supported, she's buffered by this reserve, this like backup tank of goodwill and patience and benefit of the doubt and affection and connection that she feels with her kids. It is inborn in that relationship. That is absent on day one of the stepmom stepchild relationship. It has to be actively filled, that tank. And there's some evidence to suggest that, everyday conflicts drain the stepmom stepchild tank faster than they do a mom and child. So there's a big difference right there. Even if a mom and a stepmom are feeling overlooked or kind of lonely or isolated on Mother's Day, there's something built in to kind of a safety net to catch moms that over on the stepmom side feels more like a free fall. So that's an important insight to keep in mind. Another one that I just want to mention really briefly is something we can think about as a parallel process. So oftentimes stepmoms will feel like as we move through the world and are doing our thing in our role, we're under intense scrutiny from everyone else. And suddenly it can feel like every little choice that we make, it's under a microscope. And people are attaching all this significance to what you do and don't do as a stepmom. It can feel that way, right? I hear this all the time from stepmoms, and I felt it too. The parallel is that without intending to, we don't do this intentionally, we as stepmoms, left to our own devices, will attach a similar level of significance and scrutiny to what our stepkids do and don't do, especially early on in the stepmom experience. I mentioned that not to assign any blame to you if you recognize some of that in yourself. My point is that you likely don't even recognize you're doing it or the extent to which you're doing it. A behavior or a comment or the lack of a comment from a stepchild can be read by a stepmom as hurtful, as neglectful, as unfeeling, or as trying to communicate something meaningful. Whereas in a mom and child dynamic, it's much more likely to be read as just neutral. So if you don't hear anything from your stepkids on and around Mother's Day, as a mom, it would kind of just be more likely to be written off as that's just, it's not on their minds. If there's nothing behind it, they're just not, it wasn't top of mind for the kids. It's fine. Whereas a stepmom, especially if she's already uncertain in her role or struggling in some way, is more likely to read that as proof that our relationship is not, it's on shaky ground. I knew it. This just proves it. Or because stepmoms are so likely to feel isolated and judged and often rejected in our role, this can feel like kind of the final straw, the tipping point, where on this day, or even the following weekend on Stepmother's Day, which most people don't even know about, even now, we can't have just a normal acknowledgement from the stepkids. So we place all of this significance on what our stepkids say and do or don't say and don't do. And it's not to say that, a simple acknowledgement is asking the world. It's just a matter of, is it worth it? Is it worth it to us to continue to assign so much importance to that? Or are we better served redirecting our focus and our energy elsewhere? My perspective is we are. We're much better served by focusing on things that are more within our control. It's also worth remembering that, no two step families are alike, but for almost every stepchild, the repartnering of a parent is experienced first and foremost as a loss. It might be the loss of hopes they had for their first family, for their parents to stay together, or it can be the loss of uninterrupted time with just that parent. And I say that is true even in situations where the first family partnering was chaotic, unhealthy, high conflict, and where the repartnered relationship introduces calm, happy, fun times. Like, in other words, it's not bad step families where this is the case. It's a rule, not the exception. And so days like Mother's Day can kick up mixed feelings in our stepkids. I just think that we can't remind ourselves of that enough, because we tend to go back to, but we're doing so well. We have a happy step family, and you probably do. But it doesn't change the fact that these days are emotionally charged for all of us. In our last video, we talked about step family weddings. Same thing applies here. Even when you're a happy family by all accounts, you just want to leave extra room for whatever emotions might come up for any of you on and around Mother's Day. So I want to shift to this next point because it's very connected to the point I just made. I want to encourage you to communicate your desires to your partner. That's a good rule of thumb anyway, but for sure as it relates to Mother's Day. And the reason for that is that, having worked with hundreds of stepmoms at this point and heard from many more on social media, even when we tend to talk about our desires for Mother's Day in terms of the kids, I just want to know that I'm important to them. I would love some acknowledgement of everything I do for them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's heavily reinforced by all the marketing, by the way, around Mother's Day and Stepmother's Day. It's like all about what the kids can do to honor the stepmom and the mom. But in reality, what most stepmoms are actually craving is acknowledgement from their partner. Your partner is the reason you're in this role at all, right? And oftentimes the kids are just a natural, it's like an easier place to put that focus. When really, if you're feeling a lot of resentment, part of that at the core is likely resentment you're feeling toward your partner, or at the very least, an unmet need as it relates to communication with your partner. So I want to encourage you just to speak frankly with your partner about what it is that you desire. Hey, I appreciate that, you show me that you love me this way, that way. Right now, I'm feeling kind of overlooked or invisible. As we head into Mother's Day, it would mean the world to me just to hear more often from you a thank you for showing up day after day. Or it really means a lot when you compliment me about how I'm showing up as the kid's stepmom. It doesn't have to be complicated, but waiting around in secret, like harboring all of these feelings of resentment that we're not hearing that from our partner, is such a waste of your precious energy. When it does take a little healthy vulnerability, but to be able to speak up and just say, hey, this would go such a long way for me. Just ask for it. Your partner will be happy to have some clarity, I'm sure, on what you're looking for. And what many stepmoms find, I found this when I first opened up to my partner in that way, it like takes this invisible weight off your shoulders. Suddenly, it becomes easier to release your expectations of the kids because you see how much of all those feelings really weren't to do with them at all. It was about your partner. And then bringing it all the way back to what is absolutely firmly within your control is you. As we approach Mother's Day, I want you to think, no matter what else happens, even if your partner has something planned for you, even if the kids surprise you with some kind of a celebration, come up with some sort of a plan for how you can celebrate yourself. That might look like not spending any time with your partner and the kids on or around Mother's Day. Same with Stepmother's Day. We haven't really spent much time talking about Stepmother's Day. Instead, I'm going to refer you to an article in the latest issue of Stepmom magazine. I've linked info about it below. But I was one of 4 regular contributors to the magazine, and we shared our thoughts on the pros and cons of having a designated holiday just for stepmoms. So I'd love to hear what you think, by the way, too. If you're live now or if you're catching the replay later, drop a comment. Let me know. Do you know that there's a Stepmother's Day? What do you think about it? How do you feel about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. But thinking about how you can celebrate yourself is a really important skill, because when we're at the point of feeling resentful, overlooked, isolated, taken for granted, whatever else needs to be communicated or done in our stepfamily relationships, for sure, the bedrock beneath all of that is that we're feeling depleted. And we are first and foremost the ones who are tasked with making that right. So ask yourself what you need. Never even mind about the level of celebration. What unmet need do I have? Am I exhausted? Have I been eating enough? Have I been outside? When's the last time I got on a phone call with my best friend? Do I need to speak with my own mom heading into Mother's Day? Is there someone I can acknowledge for the nurturing they've shown me up until this point? One of the resources that I'll link below is an online community for stepmoms. Sometimes being able to just be in community with other women who get it can take some of the pressure off and can also spark ideas for how you can celebrate you. You are the one at the center of all of this. And so on Mother's Day, Stepmother's Day, any other day of the year, you're where it starts and ends. And I'm here to support you. So before I leave you, I want to share with you a comment that I received. This came in email form from Donna, who is a stepmom, subscribed to the Stepmom Sleepover, my email list. And here's what Donna had to say. I just want to offer some encouragement to other stepmoms. She gave a little background. I'm a stepmom to a 15-year-old boy. I've had the privilege of being his stepmom for the last 13 and a half years. I know everyone always says it will get easier with time, and I used to be the one to roll my eyes when they said that, but I'm proof that it does. If I had those early years to do over, I would let a lot of stuff go. Trust me, it won't matter. I know you think it will. I did as well, but years down the road, it doesn't. This will be the first Mother's Day that Colt will be with us. His mom will be out of town, and he and I both are looking forward to it. We have a great relationship now because I've learned to let a lot of the little things go, but more importantly, to listen to him when he feels like he's caught between mom and dad. That's all that really matters, is how these kids turn out. Healthy, happy, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally strong. That's our job as stepmoms, to see that that's accomplished. I know if you're in the thick of things, this point of view will be hard to see. I wish you all the best. Thank you, Donna, for sharing that. And I really appreciate how that underscores some of the things we've talked about today. Releasing your expectations of the kids, getting clear on what you need, communicating simply and openly to your partner, practicing healthy vulnerability, and then being still and letting your partner communicate back, and getting real about what you need and how you can celebrate yourself, because you're doing this incredible thing day after day. Mother's Day is just one day. How are you going to care for yourself well for the long haul? Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you. Again, if you're catching the replay, be sure to check out the description below for resources to support you. A few of them I want to mention in particular. I mentioned the May issue of Stepmom Magazine. That is focused heavily on Mother's Day and Stepmother's Day. I highly recommend it. I'm hosting a note exchange for stepmoms everywhere in the world. Right now we have 5 continents of stepmoms represented. I'll have a link to that below. We're running it through the month of May, and you'll be teamed up in pods of other stepmoms, and you'll exchange notes with one another just to encourage each other during this season. And finally, if you are wanting my top recommendations for free and paid resources to come alongside you on your journey as a stepmom, sign up for my Stepmom Starter Pack of support resources. That's linked below as well. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.